and welcome to Morning Vibes, weekly conversations to elevate how we live, think, and show up. So, Michelle and I have been doing Morning Vibes over on Instagram for about a year now. And today we are launching our first episode here on YouTube. So, we thank you for joining us. This month, we are going to be talking about living intentionally. So, looking at areas of our lives that we may be living on autopilot, or maybe, as I like to call it, a metaphysical tumbleweed, where we're just kind of blowing around aimlessly. Maybe you feel stuck or overwhelmed. We're going to talk about that and things that we can do to take the reins of our lives, so to speak. Before we dive in, please remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss an episode. And this week, we're going to open by talking about awareness, self awareness, emotional awareness, which, Michelle, really is the foundation for living intentionally.
Absolutely. Because so many of us wake up immediately and we go into motion alarm, phone, gym, email, coffee, responsibilities. And it's like a react, respond, repeat theme. And before we know it, the day is lived us instead of us living the day. So much of life can pass us by that way in routines, habits of responsibility, expectations, distractions. And then we find ourselves moving through our days reacting instead of choosing. And so intentional living is inviting something very different. It asks us to pause, to notice, to connect with awareness. So when we are in awareness, we are at choice. The way I like to stay in choice is just by asking a few simple questions when I find myself in that hustle or on autopilot mode. So some of the questions I ask myself is this choice nourishing my nervous system or is it draining me? What would it take for me to respond from groundedness? Am I aligned with what I say I want? I stay and I check in throughout the day because these types of questions move me into awareness and allow me to awaken consciously. So when we're living on purpose in small ways, we feel more grounded. We feel more connected and empowered.
I love that. Yeah, I always think like self awareness. What am I thinking? What am I saying? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Because as you said, so often we just jump into motion, we move on autopilot, and we're not paying attention. And really, that's how we manifest everything in our lives. So if we want something different, if we want to change something or add something or delete something, it always begins with awareness of our thoughts, our words, our feelings, and our actions. And it's all in our control, right? So when we accept that responsibility, now we're in our power. And most of us, it seems, as we come into adulthood, we spend a little bit of time in what we refer to as the victim consciousness, thinking that things are happening to us. And then as soon as we start to wake up to our power, we shift into recognizing that things are happening for us and our awakening. And as we become aware of those thoughts, feelings, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Now, as you said, we become at choice and we can begin to choose what we want to think, feel, and do to bring in more of what we want to be experiencing in our lives.
Yes, because self awareness is that first act of transformation. There's the saying, you cannot change what you are unwilling to see.
Mhm.
And that stumps me for a minute. I'm like, I have to think about that. Because transformation begins the moment that we stay encouraged to look at ourselves honestly. When we bring light to what we've been ignoring or unaware of, then that creates space for understanding. So when we live in awareness, we begin to know what truly matters. We make choices that reflect maybe our values, our purpose, because self awareness really is about listening more deeply, communicating more honestly. And it allows us to center, to feel calm, to participate in creating our life, but also about releasing old patterns. It invites growth and choosing healthier patterns. It- Can we invite ourselves to choose at least one moment to live in awareness? Because we're not here to just get through the day, we're here to experience the days with wide open hearts joyfully.
Yeah. And I love what you said about we have to be willing to see in order to make the changes. And
Mhm.
it sounds simple, but the truth is, it takes a lot of courage to be willing to see what we may not want to see, whether that's in our financial situation, whether that's in our relationship. Because once we see it and we have that awareness, now we're going to have that little nagging thing to change it. But as we had talked about before, once we know that we're in our power, it becomes a little bit easier to take that responsibility. But the other thing I want to talk about is emotional awareness, right? Our emotions have so much information for us. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in our emotions and we think that we are our emotions, but the truth is we are not our emotions. We feel them, but we are not them. So I always say it's easy, what I feel, to get that separation. Take a couple of breaths. If you're feeling overwhelmed or angry or frustrated or whatever it is, take a couple of breaths to get that separation so that we recognize that we're not our emotions, and then we can get curious, right? It's like anger. I'm so angry. Take the breath, get some separation, and then what is this anger here to show me? Maybe you didn't like the way somebody treated you, but rather than communicating it, you stuffed it. Or you allowed something where now you realize you need to put up a boundary. Even envy. Envy is great, right? It shows us something that we want in our own lives. So there's some steps around all that that we can talk about in the upcoming weeks as we talk about living intentionally. But the first step, again, is just that awareness that we are not our emotions, but they have amazing information and wisdom for us for what we want and don't want in our lives.
Yes. And living on autopilot can create an emotional reaction for us. So, what does living on autopilot look like? It means saying yes when you mean no. I mean, how many of us do that?
Mhm.
Or reacting emotionally instead of responding thoughtfully. Staying busy so we don't have to feel. These can contribute to the emotional upset that we feel. It's not bad. It's unconscious living.
Yep.
It's just being able to identify it, identify your emotions, identify your feelings, identify your actions and reaction. So, what living in awareness looks like is setting an intention before your feet hit the floor in the morning, choosing your first thought of the day, um, waking up in question and contemplation. Some of my favorites that I like to resort back to or use and alternate at different times are, what would it take for me to choose to see the good in everything today?
Mhm.
Sometimes I just lay in bed and think about that. Or what if love led the way? And what if I just listen to my body? What
Yep.
would my body say? Like, these bring us to the present moment and awareness of ourselves, what we need, what we want. I actually set an alarm on my phone throughout the day to remind me to re-ask these types of questions, because intentional living is really micro moments of awareness.
Yep. And how absolutely how we take the reins of our life. There's just one more thing I wanted to add in, and it's to become aware of patterns. So if
Mhm.
you are having different jobs, but the same unwanted results, different relationships, same dynamics, recurring health challenges, losing weight only to gain it all back. When we become aware that we are cycling and recycling the same stories, just with a different cast, different crew, maybe different props, with that awareness, we open the door to that true transformation and that true lasting change. Because as we said in the beginning, it all begins with those thoughts, the feelings, the actions. So when we want to live on purpose with intention, the other thing that can really help us is to just notice if we are repeating. And again, we look at our outer results, right? We look at our life. That's the results. That's showing us what we are essentially, thinking, feeling, and doing, which we can
Mhm.
shift at any time. So getting intentional about choosing what it is we want to experience, how we want to experience, and then matching up our insides so that we can attract it on the outside.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's the autopilot is sometimes we're just living very triggered. Instead of responding immediately, what if we just chose a statement that was more about, let me think about that and get back to you. Stacey, you're really good at that. Like, I notice you do that often. Like, that gives yourself and your nervous system time to settle, time to think, time to reset. Like we're auditing our yeses. That's really empowering to living in awareness, to living intentionally. So we before we commit to anything, just even taking a moment and thinking, all right, am I aligning with my truth or am I people pleasing? You know, whatever your trigger is,
Yeah.
but choosing to live just even one moment fully in awareness, choosing that moment. Maybe it's before a meal, maybe it's before you start the car. Having a habit, a new habit to create conscious awareness, intentional living, and self awareness. So, Stacey, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to offer?
Yes. Just that it takes practice, right?
Mhm.
So it
Absolutely.
takes practice. So it's a dedicated effort and then it takes practice. And I'm always talking about my daily spiritual practice, daily mindfulness practice helps with that, right? Taking some intentional time in meditation, walking in nature, doing yoga, whatever it is to keep me present and keep me in a space of responding versus reacting. And then what we do in our mindfulness practice, we begin to do more and more in our lives. It's the saying we say in yoga, what we do on the mat, we then learn how to take it off the mat. And it's practice. So we
Mhm.
don't beat ourselves up when we're not doing it. We just, again, awareness, we recognize it, and then we take that breath and we keep that intention to stay aware.
Beautiful. Yes. Okay. So we meet every Thursday, same intention. And if you connected with our chat and our live today, then we invite you to subscribe and hit the bell to repeat these weekly chats so that you are in the know. So thank you for being part of Morning Vibes. And until next week, keep rising and stay intentional.
Bye, everybody.